Hey everyone, so today's video is definitely gonna creep you out. We're diving into the Cumberland wilderness, where people swear something there isn't right. If you guys enjoy this kind of content, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and let me know if you want more videos like this. Alright, let's get into these Cumberland Mountains horror stories. Jack and I had been friends since year 8. We were never the super sentimental type, didn't do birthday calls or long catch-ups, but we always showed up. Always down for a hike, a pint, or just shutting up and walking in the rain without talking. We'd done a load of hikes over the years, mostly in the lakes, a couple out in Wales. But that October, we wanted something quieter. Jack had found this 2-day trail east of Aldmere, through a patch of fells and forest that sat awkwardly between 3 counties. We each had our own tent. Jack snored like an old generator, and we were both a bit gear happy. New boots, new phones, fresh trail meals. All the kit. Felt good, actually. Felt prepared. The first day was fine. Crisp air, a bit of wind on the ridges, but nothing bad. The trail cut through sloping pine woods for the most part, then climbed up onto this narrow ridge with proper views westward. We made camp just below the top, tucked into a small clearing where the trees opened up into sky. It was the kind of spot that makes you feel like you've earned the silence. We cooked some packet curry, sat around with our head torches dimmed, talked about nothing, then turned in early. Classic first-day rhythm. Around 2 or 3 in the morning, I woke up needing to pee. Nothing urgent, just one of those middle-of-the-night annoyances that gets louder the more you try to ignore it. It was quiet outside. I sat up, pulled on my boots, didn't bother with a torch. The moon gave enough light to make out where I was going, and I didn't want to blind myself or Jack. I stepped a few meters off into the trees, dealt with it, zipped up, turned around, and that's when I noticed his tent. The flap was open. Wide open. Now, Jack's not casual about that sort of thing. He keeps his tent zipped tight, even if it's just drizzling. There's something tidy about him when we're outdoors. That tent open like that, it was weird. Felt off. I called out his name, soft at first. Nothing. I stepped closer, looked inside. Empty. No bag, no coat, no boots inside either. He'd gone out with everything on, so it wasn't just a quick midnight piss. I called again, louder this time. That's when I heard footsteps. Not far. Just off to the right, maybe 20 or 30 paces into the trees. But the way they sounded, that was the first time I felt a cold flicker in my chest. They were slow. Heavy. Like someone dragging their souls instead of stepping properly. You know how hikers walk heel, toe, shift. This wasn't that. This was off. Sloppy. Barefoot, maybe? I flicked on my torch and pointed it toward the sound. There he was. Jack, standing, maybe 10 meters away, half concealed by trees. Not moving. Just standing there. His arms were loose at his sides, and his head was tilted back, looking up into the canopy. Not like he'd spotted something. More like he'd forgotten what he was doing. I called his name again. My voice sounded strange in that stillness. He turned his head slowly toward me but didn't answer. Didn't blink, either. Just stared. I walked toward him, cautiously. The beam of my torch caught his face and froze there. His eyes were glassy, unfocused. Like when someone's had a bit too much and is still standing but not really present. "Did you hit your head or something?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. He blinked once, but didn't speak. Then he turned around and began walking further into the woods. I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't that. No warning, no reaction, just this slow, quiet retreat like he was following something invisible. I stepped forward and grabbed his arm. His coat was cold under my hand. "Jack, come on." "What are you doing?" He paused. For half a second, I thought he was going to say something. Then he turned his head and smiled, and I let go. I've never seen that smile on his face before. It wasn't just wrong. It was fake. Like watching someone imitate how a human should smile but missing some part of it. His cheeks moved, but the eyes didn't. It didn't belong on him. He turned back around and kept walking. I followed for a few steps. I don't know why. Maybe part of me still thought this was just a weird sleepwalk, Or maybe I was hoping I was wrong about what I'd seen. But then I noticed the way he moved. His steps were too flat. He wasn't adjusting to the uneven ground roots, stones, dips. He just shuffled forward, arms swinging slightly but without rhythm, like a wind-up toy running down. I stopped. And when I stopped, he did too. He didn't turn, didn't say anything, just stood there, back to me, as still as the trees. I whispered his name, but the sound felt swallowed up by the forest. I turned and walked quickly, but trying not to panic, all the way back to my tent. Zipped it shut, sat inside with the torch on, every muscle tense. I didn't sleep. At first light I heard something outside. Unzipped the tent. Jack was lying on the ground just beside it, curled on his side like a kid, still in his coat and boots. His face was scratched up, mud on his collar, a red line of dried blood above his eyebrow. I crouched next to him. He stirred, eyes blinking against the morning light. What the hell?" he mumbled. He looked at me like he didn't recognize me at first. He had no idea where he was or how he got there. Said he remembered us eating, then nothing. Kept asking why his head hurt. I told him he must have gotten up in the night and tripped over something in the dark. It was the easiest version to say out loud. He nodded like he believed it. Or maybe he just needed an answer. We packed up slowly. Jack moved like his balance was off, like his legs were being remote controlled by someone else. It took us twice as long to get back. I kept the GPS open constantly, checking every few minutes. Every sound in the woods made me flinch. Nothing else happened directly, but just under 2 miles from the car park, I found something on the path. A footprint, barefoot, long, narrow. The ball of the foot sat too far forward. The heel was shallow, like whoever left it was barely putting weight down. But it was fresh, mud still wet inside it. We didn't talk much on the drive. Took him straight to A&E. They kept him overnight. CT scans, observation, the works. Diagnosis, mild traumatic brain injury. Doctors said he was lucky. Falling on that terrain could have been worse. He never got the memory back. But a few days later, I went to see him at his place. Brought food, checked in, made sure he was resting. We sat there watching some trash TV in silence for a bit, and I asked, as casually as I could, "Do you remember anything weird from that night?" He was quiet for a long time. Then he said slowly, like he was trying to remember the shape of the sentence, "I think I saw you in the woods." He didn't look at me when he said it. And it didn't sound like an accusation. It sounded like someone describing a dream they didn't trust. I don't know if that thing was trying to copy me, or if it was showing me what it had already done to Jack. But since that night, I've never seen him walk the same. I picked up a short-term surveying job in the hills west of Redbrook. That afternoon, I was working through the farthest section of the map they'd assigned me, way out past the old ridge where the topography started getting a little weird. Mostly, I was just trying to cover as much ground as I could before sundown. I was about 3 hours in when I came across a collapsed fence post near a sloping path that dropped toward a rocky hollow. I remember bending down to sketch a rough note and hearing something scrape along the ridge above me. Not a loud sound, just a dry drag, like leather on stone. Quick, but intentional. I stood up and looked around. Nothing. I scanned the ridge line for movement. A deer, maybe. Could have been anything. It's not like I was new to the woods. Sounds get strange out there, especially when you're alone and your brain starts filling in blanks. I told myself it was probably some animal, maybe even another hiker, though I hadn't seen a soul all day. Still, I waited another few seconds just to be sure. Then I moved on. I pushed through a thick patch of gorse and followed the trail down into the hollow. It was quiet. Quieter than usual, even for this far out. The slope was slick, and the ground got softer the lower I went, like water ran through here after heavy rain. At the bottom, there was a partial stone wall, half collapsed and overgrown with ivy, probably marking some old boundary from back when the land was parceled differently. That's when I smelled it. Sweet at first, almost floral. But as I stepped closer, it shifted into something heavier, like raw meat left out too long in the sun. The kind of scent that makes your stomach tense before you've even figured out what's wrong. A few steps ahead, I spotted a dip in the soil. I crouched down and found what looked like a small, deliberately shaped pit. Shallow but neatly lined with hand-sized rocks. Inside it was a pile of feathers. Mostly black and gray, some torn, others almost pristine. No bird. No body. Just feathers. And sitting right on top, like someone placed it there with care, was a cracked eggshell. Ivory white, split perfectly in half. It didn't make any sense. No signs of a struggle. No blood. No prints. Just this clean, eerie arrangement that felt too deliberate to be natural. I stayed crouched for a while, just staring at it. My mind ran through every reasonable possibility. Some old animal den, maybe a hawk had nested nearby, or a fox had stashed something, but it didn't line up. I'd seen predator kills before. This wasn't that. I don't know how long I was frozen there, but at some point, I became aware of the air behind me. Not a sound, not even a rustle. Just that sense, like the air had compressed, like something was waiting. I turned slowly, and for a second, I didn't see anything. Then it moved. Up the slope, tucked between two leaning birch trees, something shifted. Crouched low. Big. Bigger than it should have been. It didn't look right. Its shape was off, all wrong proportions. Limbs that bent too far the wrong way. Arms. If they were arms, hung low and narrow. Its head stayed tucked low to its chest, and the surface of its body, skin or fur or something between, looked dark, mottled, patchy. I froze. It froze. For maybe 5 seconds, neither of us moved. Then it started to circle. Not toward me. Around me. Fast, covering ground uphill, skimming across the slope in a wide arc above the pit. I tried to track it, spinning slightly, but it was faster than my eyes could keep up with. I glimpsed it between trees, then it'd vanish again. Then another flicker of motion closer, higher. Then nothing. I backed toward the wall. My boots slipped in the soft ground. I scanned the tree line, heart thudding like I'd just run a sprint, but everything had gone still again. Then, behind me, I heard it. A stone being moved, not falling. Shifted. I turned fast, and it was there. On the other side of the old stone wall. Closer now. Still crouched. Its limbs didn't look strong enough to hold weight, yet it balanced perfectly, like it was weightless. The surface of its body looked stretched, parts of it hairless, others covered in rough patches. It was like skin over something else. Something angular, and the eyes, God, the eyes. They didn't glint or reflect. They just sat there, empty, black. Black, not like they were painted black, but like light just stopped when it hit them. I took a step back. Then another. I didn't want to run. Not yet. My body was screaming to bolt, but something told me not to. Like if I moved too fast, it would move faster. It didn't follow. Just watched. Then I turned. Not a sprint. Just fast, steady steps uphill. My legs burned. My boots caught on low branches and roots. I didn't care. I just kept going. And then, just when I thought I'd gotten far enough to stop, I heard it again, leaves shifting behind me. This time, I ran. I didn't look back. Just full-on sprinted up the slope, pushing through brush so thick it scratched my arms and face. My lungs burned. My vision blurred. I hit a root and went down hard, cracked my hand against something sharp. I scrambled up, shaking, turned, nothing. But I swear I felt it. Not just behind me, in the air. In my chest. I didn't stop running until the trees thinned and I hit the edge of the trail. The ground leveled out, and I could see the sun again through the canopy. My truck was parked half a mile down a gravel forestry road. I made it in less than 10 minutes. I locked the doors and just sat there, hands shaking against the steering wheel. I stared out through the windshield, half expecting to see it standing at the edge of the trees, but nothing moved. I never went back to that part of the map. I was 31 when I moved into the terrace near the fell side, just past the edge of Brantham. The cottage was stone-built and lopsided, part of a two-unit setup with a thin, shared wall. I ended up in the left half. For the first couple of weeks, I didn't see anyone next door. No movement, no music, no sign of life other than the occasional creak through the wall around dinner time. I figured the place was empty, maybe used as a holiday let or just sitting in that weird limbo old places fall into when no one quite knows who owns them. Then I saw her. It was a Thursday evening, just getting dim outside. I was standing at the kitchen sink rinsing a mug when I noticed someone standing in the garden next door. A woman. She wasn't gardening or hanging up laundry or anything normal, just standing in the middle of the yard, completely still, staring straight up at the sky. Her arms hung limp at her sides, and her head was tilted back so far I half expected her to topple over. I watched her for a while. She didn't move. I checked the time, 4 minutes and 32 seconds before she finally turned and walked out of sight behind the wall. The next morning I asked the landlord if he knew who lived there. He just muttered something like, "She keeps to herself," and steered the conversation toward my rent. When I asked again at the butcher's, the guy behind the counter didn't even look up. Just said, "Long enough," and changed the subject. A few days later, I started hearing the footsteps. They came every night, just after 6, always the same slow, steady pace, from front to back, back to front. No TV, no talking. Just this repetitive walk, not heavy, but deliberate. You'd think it would get annoying, but it didn't. It was almost too regular, like she was pacing out of habit rather than boredom. One evening, I tapped lightly on the shared wall. Just once. A kind of friendly knock. The footsteps stopped immediately. Not a pause, just silence. I waited. Nothing. They didn't start again that night. We finally spoke a week or so after that. I opened the back door to take the bin out, and she was already standing there on her side of the garden, just a few steps away. I hadn't heard her come out. She was staring directly at me, no expression on her face. "You left your upstairs light on last night," she said. "It threw me off." I blinked, nodded slowly. "I wasn't in." She just stared at me a second longer, then said, "I know. That's why I thought you should know." Then she turned and walked back toward her door without another word. No smile, no nod, not even a proper goodbye. Just vanished inside. After that, I got careful. I started double-checking lights before I left the house. Locked the doors, even when I was just going to the shop. One night, my front door lock jammed weirdly, like someone had tried to turn it from outside. The bolt was halfway across when I got home, and I knew I hadn't left it that way. I told myself maybe it had slipped. Old houses do weird things. Still, I started keeping the key in my pocket even while I was inside. Then, one morning, I opened the curtains and saw the back path behind her garden was covered in these tiny pebbles, arranged in spirals. Not random scatterings, precise, perfect spirals all the way from her gate up to the back step. I didn't see her place them, didn't see her sweep them up either. The next day, they were gone. Not a single one left. After that, I kept noticing little things. My bins would be in a slightly different position. A mug I was sure I'd left on the sink would be back in the cupboard. I told myself I was just distracted. Work was tiring. Long hours, a lot of sanding, a lot of dust. One Friday afternoon, I came home early with a headache. She was in the lane out front and stopped me as I walked past. "You shouldn't nap now," she said. I raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" She shrugged and looked up at the sky. "It's when the hole's open," and then she walked off. That night I couldn't sleep, not from fear, at least not yet, but just that strange feeling when something doesn't sit right and your brain won't let it go. I lay in bed for hours, eyes on the ceiling, half waiting for the footsteps. Instead, I heard something else. It was faint at first, a dragging sound. Long and slow, like something heavy being pulled across floorboards. Then, silence. Then it came again. No footsteps in between. Just the scrape, wait, scrape. I pressed my ear to the wall. It was coming from her side, no doubt. But it wasn't random. It had rhythm, like she was dragging something back and forth in careful increments. I went to the window. Her curtains were open for the first time. No lights on. I could see her outline in the dark, standing behind the glass, still, facing my window. I stepped back quickly. Didn't sleep at all after that. The next day, I tried asking Linda, the woman at the post office, if she knew anything about my neighbor. Her eyebrows lifted the second I brought it up. "You mean the one with the eyes?" she said. That caught me. "She's not a bad sort," Linda went on, "but she's not normal. Doesn't blink. Have you noticed that? Some say she moves easier at night." That evening, my post had been disturbed again. Nothing taken, but everything stacked neatly in squares. Little perfect piles, like someone had sorted them by shape or size. It made my skin crawl. I knocked on her door. No answer. Knocked again. Still nothing. Then I noticed her letterbox was stuffed full of dead leaves. Not like they'd blown in, like they'd been deliberately placed there one by one. 2 nights later, I woke up for no reason, no noise, no dream. Just suddenly wide awake. My phone was dead. Completely black. I reached over to plug it in, and that's when I saw it. A pale shape moving outside in the narrow lane between our houses. I leaned toward the window. It was her. She was crawling, on hands and knees, slow and methodical, making a circle around her own house. I watched her complete one full loop. When she finished, she stopped at her back door and, without any buildup, just stood up in one fluid motion like a marionette pulled by a string. I dropped beneath the windowsill and didn't move again until dawn. I called the council the next day, tried to sound calm. Said I was worried about my neighbor, that she might be experiencing something. They sent a man round that afternoon. I watched from behind my curtain as he knocked, she answered. He didn't go in. They spoke for maybe half a minute. Then he nodded and walked off like nothing had happened. That night, I found another pile of the spiral stones, this time on my bedroom windowsill. I brushed them off, shut the window, locked it. Felt like locking it mattered, though I wasn't sure why. 2 weeks passed. I started sleeping with the hallway light on. I kept music playing quietly just to break the silence. Then one night, 3 slow knocks at the front door. I checked the peephole. No one. Then came 3 more knocks from the back door. Then the side of the house. Then, impossibly, from the ceiling above my bedroom, the attic. That was the only time I called the police. 2 officers came out, had a look around, didn't find anything. I explained everything, what I'd seen, what I'd heard. The younger one gave me that look people give when they're pretending to believe you. The older one just said, "You're not the first tenant who's called us from that address." I moved out the next morning, didn't wait for sunrise. Paid the fee, loaded the car, and drove off without saying goodbye. Left the key under the mat. A few years back, early spring, my Uncle Martin gave me a call out of nowhere. He ran this little woodland survey company up near Penrith. Said he needed someone dependable, someone who wouldn't wander off or hand in a bunch of messy notes. He had a new plot to chart between Bowscale and the edge of the Grainsdale runoff. I'd just left a teaching job in East London, burned out, honestly, and hadn't lined anything up yet. So I said, sure. 5 days in the woods sounded like a decent reset. We stayed in a bothy his company leased through the National Trust. Dry stone, tucked between a shallow ridge and a run of scrubby pine. 2 rooms, no power, but solid. One room had bunks and a shelf stacked with tinned food, and the other had a wood stove and a small table with a camping kettle. No electricity, no reception. Closest track was an hour away by foot. I think that was part of the appeal for him. He liked the quiet. Each morning, Martin gave me a printed map grid and handed over a clipboard, an old Garmin, and a beat-up digital camera. His job was the technical stuff. Soil core samples, liaising with whoever hired us. I was just meant to walk the plotted paths and record surface features. Document root structures, signs of animal erosion, anything that might indicate ground movement. It was straightforward and kind of peaceful. The 3rd morning started like the others. I left just after sunrise, crossing the footbridge near the bramble stand and working northeast along the ridge line. The forest that way was a little denser, but the paths were manageable. The light was flat, and the ground was still damp from rain the night before. I remember thinking how nice it was not to be in a classroom full of flickering lights and dried-out whiteboard markers. Around 10, I spotted something strange. 4 small pine saplings, each maybe a meter long, had been pulled clean from the earth. Roots still attached, not snapped. Dry, though, like they'd been out of the ground for a while. They weren't dumped. They were placed. Laid out in a soft curve, evenly spaced, all pointing gently downhill. It didn't feel like litter or vandalism. More like a gesture. Like someone had been trying to shape something. I took a photo, made a note, and kept moving. 2 hours later, deeper into the forest, I found something else. This one stopped me for a good 10 minutes. It was a clearing flat, maybe 6 meters across, and right in the middle was a weird arrangement of stones and branches, a kind of net shape, like an overlapping grid, but not regular. The branches were stripped clean of bark, every single one. And the stones, they were smooth, rounded, not the kind of rock that turns up naturally on that slope. They looked like river stones, but the nearest stream was miles away. I crouched to get a better look, touched one of the branches. My fingers came back sticky, and then it hit me someone had done this recently, while we were working the same plot. I stood, scanned the trees, nothing. Just the kind of stillness that doesn't feel earned, too sudden. I realized I hadn't heard a single bird in at least half an hour. No breeze either. It was like the sound had been sucked out of the place. I checked the GPS. I wasn't that far off track, but it didn't feel right. I turned to backtrack northwest, should have taken me toward the style we used, but after 5 minutes of steady walking, I stepped right back into the same clearing. Same stones, same branches, same faint mark where I'd knelt earlier. I stood very still for a few seconds, just listening. Then I turned again, reset my direction, east, toward the boundary line, and walked steadily for 20 minutes. Nothing looked familiar. Worse, the trees started changing. They got darker, shorter, shorter. Their bark looked almost burned, but there was no smell, no heat, just an unnatural darkness to the trunks, like the color had been drained out of them. Then I heard a whistle. It didn't fit. 4 sharp notes, rising slightly, like someone trying to get a dog's attention. Not a bird. Not random. I froze. Waited. 30 seconds later, it came again, this time from the opposite direction. Same pitch, same spacing. I called out. Nothing aggressive, just enough to let someone know I was there. "Surveyor out here, you all right?" No reply. I walked faster after that, pushing through low ferns and sidestepping routes I hadn't seen before. I wasn't running, but I wasn't wasting time either. Every 5 minutes I checked the GPS, and every time the triangle spun uselessly for a minute before dropping onto coordinates that didn't line up with anything on the map. No signal. No features I recognized. The sky kept getting darker. That heavy kind of overcast that makes it feel later than it is. I was starting to worry I'd have to bivvy somewhere if I didn't find the bothy soon. And then finally, I saw the roof through the trees. It was nearly 5. Martin wasn't there. His pack was gone, but his boots were still beside the stove. He never went out without them. The kettle was cold. That more than anything made me pause. He always put it on when he came back. I waited. 2 hours. Then 3. No footsteps. No torchlight through the trees. Then the whistle came again. Quieter now, but not far off. I bolted the door. I don't know how long I sat there. Time lost meaning a bit. I kept one ear to the wall, listening. I had the little hatchet we use for firewood in my hand the whole time. Dumb, probably, but it made me feel less useless. At some point past midnight, I heard movement outside. Not walking, not footsteps, more like dragging. Like someone shifting their weight across the earth instead of lifting their legs. A low scraping sound, steady. Then, a hum. Not a tune. Just a deep, rough noise. Like someone clearing their throat but drawn out. 4 seconds maybe, then again, lower. Slower. Then something touched the outer wall. Not nails, not claws. Something flat, solid. Like a heavy bag brushing stone. I didn't sleep. At dawn, the forest looked almost normal again. Faded light through the trees, cold ashes in the stove. No Martin. I left a note, took both packs, and walked the southern route we'd used on day one. I didn't stop. Not once. Not even when I thought I heard the whistle behind me. A contractor was unloading fence posts at the edge of the logging road. Gave me a ride to Penrith without asking many questions. I got on a bus and went home. When people asked, I said my uncle hadn't come back from his track and I waited, then left. Which wasn't a lie. 3 days later, they called me. They found him. His clothes were intact, neatly placed, like someone had folded him out of them. But inside where he should have been was just moss. This dry, pale moss and a fine dust. Almost like pollen, no bones, no blood. His watch was still ticking. The coroner said it was probably animal activity and fast decay, not publicized. Nothing official. I didn't chase the payment. Never asked. Every now and then I still get emails from field agencies looking for help up north. I delete them without opening. I don't even take the A66 anymore.